today we're going to be talking about some of the invisible mistakes that we make as founders and entrepreneurs. So, some of the biggest mistakes aren't obvious. They're essentially invisible while you're making them. But then luckily later we get to go back and reflect and see that it was a mistake and learn from it. But while it's happening, it's a lot harder to, kind of understand. And obviously, if we knew while we were doing it, we wouldn't make that mistake in the first place. So I think one of the things that allows us to make some mistakes as an entrepreneur is being too close to the problem, being too close to our business, too close to the product or service. At the end of the day, sometimes you have to take a step out. Sometimes you have to take a step back and look at the whole picture. And we're always working on our business. We're always so close to it that sometimes we don't see, the flaws or the holes or the even the big picture. Sometimes we feel like we're the only person in the world who sees the big picture, and sometimes, maybe we're kind of missing it entirely, even ourselves. So, don't hold yourself, too harshly, I guess I should say, because you may be too close to some of your problems or issues. Sometimes as entrepreneurs as well, I think we kind of mask activity with efficiency, which definitely is not the case, especially in today's world with AI and all the tools we have. Being efficient, is a lot different from just working and doing mindless tasks that we could have AI do or, something else. So we have to make sure that we're not masking our, activity as productivity, because it's not necessarily, right? Especially if there are other people who could do these things for us, or other software or services, or, like I said, using some type of AI. Now, early wins delay hard truths, right? So if you do have a winning product or service and it starts winning early, a lot of the times later we're going to find problems that are coming up. A lot of the times those problems might be on the back end of actually delivering the product or service, but they're inevitably going to come. So we can't mistake, progress and even success with not having any mistakes and not having any issues. We want to always keep our ears open with our customers and hearing their concerns and mistakes we may have made, that they are aware of, or our staff, our team. So we need to make sure that even if a product or service is selling a lot, or even if it's going well, even if it was an instant hit right away, we want to make sure that we're looking out for those potential problems that are inevitably going to come. And I would say that the faster success you have with that product or service, probably the more problems that are going to come. And so we want to be aware of that for sure. When we're making mistakes as entrepreneurs, it doesn't feel wrong in that time, right? It only feels wrong later. So of course, hindsight is 2020, but we can't blame ourselves too much for that, I guess I should say, because it doesn't feel wrong when you're doing it. The only way you're going to learn is to do it and, learn from the mistake, which as entrepreneurs is our school, right? As entrepreneurs, our school is to go out there, do things and make mistakes. And that's how we're going to learn as entrepreneurs. No class can teach that. No college can give you a degree in that. It is something that we have to do as entrepreneurs. That is our way of learning and our university that we go to as the Entrepreneur University. So let's talk about some common blind spots that slow businesses down. Some people, especially early entrepreneurs, they're working extremely hard, but still not moving revenue, confusing effort with effectiveness, right? So effort is the backbone of what we do as an entrepreneur, working those sleepless nights, working, all the hours, getting the work done, being excited about getting it done. But at the end of the day, it does have to be effective. So we have to make sure that we're looking at what we're doing and making sure that it's actually producing measurable results. Avoiding conversations like sales is definitely not a good sign on where your business is going. So, not selling, not asking for feedback, you know, not hearing somebody tell you no, these are things that are not going to help you move forward and not going to help you solve your problems. We want to make sure that we're staying on top of everything as much as possible. As an entrepreneur, I think some of the mistakes that we make is building our products or services around us and our thoughts and dreams instead of our customers. Especially once we start getting a product out there and getting feedback from customers, that should be 100% of our focus. But I think we get excited about things. We're the one that had the idea in the first place, and we had an idea to add this and add that, or say our product or service won't do this or won't do that, or we're not going to be this way. But you definitely want to be willing to change. You want to be willing to adapt. You want to be willing to give your customers what they want. So as an entrepreneur, try not to build your product or service so much around you and your opinion and your personal thoughts. Try to get it built as the minimal viable product, get it out there to people, and then use the feedback to decide what to add and what to change, as opposed to just your personal feelings. Sometimes we're a little too close to it as the entrepreneur, as the founder, of the person who may have invented the product or service. It may have been your idea from the beginning. Sometimes we're a little bit too close to it. So just keep that in mind. Your business isn't about you, it's about the buyer, right? It's not about us as entrepreneurs, it's about our customers. And it's about giving our customers what they want in a way that they want it, and making sure that we can do that in the most efficient manner. And if we can do that, then we can maximize our profits, increase our profit margin, and then scale up from there. But it all starts with giving our customers what they want and not making it about us as the entrepreneur, not even necessarily making it about our company, but making it about our customers and delivering what our customers want and need. So why do some founders not catch some of these mistakes early on? I think a lot of the mistakes made early on are due to no accountability, because as an entrepreneur, a lot of times we have no one to answer to for accountability. So in the beginning, we're training ourselves to be accountable to ourselves, and that's going to take some time, right? So especially if we don't have any other, co-founders or business partners, it's only us that can hold ourselves accountable, and it's a process to learn how to do that. So I think some of the early mistakes that we tend to make as entrepreneurs is, just not holding ourselves accountable for those mistakes that we're making. And it's going to take time to learn to not only not make those mistakes, but to hold ourselves accountable for the mistakes. So learning to hold ourselves accountable in general is one of the things that's going to have to, occur over time, that we're going to have to learn. So we're going to have to learn how to learn from our mistakes, if that makes any sense. If sales are going well, then sometimes we're not forced to reflect on things and get enough feedback. So I think sometimes it's the gift and the curse of something going well and selling, and then us not having to be forced to go back, look at things, dissect things, not feeling forced to look at so much customer feedback, because if a lot of it is good and a lot of it's selling, that's great, but we want to make sure that we pay attention to the bad ones. So sometimes our success can also be our curse, and we can run into bigger problems later because we didn't have that challenge of having to really dive deep into solving all the future problems of this product or service, because it's flying off the shelves. And that'll usually make bigger problems later. So not being forced to reflect on things, to dissect things, and to improve them can definitely be a source of larger problems later. One of the hardest things as an entrepreneur is holding ourselves accountable and holding ourselves uh, to adhere to deadlines. When you're the one who makes the deadline, it's pretty easy to just scratch out the number and put a new number on the date of that deadline, especially because a lot of us aren't even putting it down on paper, right? So some entrepreneurs, the deadline is just in their head. So that's very easy to just change the date in your head. Um, so that's always why it's better to write things down as well, because you have to physically cross out a date, put a new date. You're changing things. It might make you feel a little bit guilty about that, but you should have these things written down and with deadlines, and then you can cross off that thing when you do it, and do it by that deadline. But having that extra step of having to go to that piece of paper or that document on your computer and change the deadline for it puts an extra step there that can help us have some self accountability. But at the end of the day, just keep in mind it's very hard as an entrepreneur and as somebody who has to hold yourself accountable to make sure that you're not pushing back your own deadlines. So, how do we kind of expose some of these blind spots that we have to potential problems or issues that are going to arise? So, for one, asking better questions is a huge advantage as an entrepreneur. Asking the questions of yourself, your company, and asking questions to your customers and using that feedback. Questions are very powerful in business. You want to not only question everything that's going on, but you want to ask your customers questions. You want to ask your staff questions, your team. You want to ask your business partners questions and make sure that you're taking all that into account, especially the bottom line, which is the questions for your customers. The feedback from your customers is definitely number one that you want to listen to. When we're trying to pre, preemptively prevent problems in the future, one of the things that we want to do is to be tracking outcomes instead of feelings. So as entrepreneurs, we always want to be tracking outcomes. We want to be tracking data instead of how we feel. And I'll tell you what, in the beginning of my career, I definitely had times where I would say, man, I feel like this is happening, or I feel like everybody's buying this, or everybody's doing this. And then my business partner would pull up the numbers and show me that that's just not the case, right? There's hard facts and evidence of this is how many of those we sold. This is the conversion rate of them. There'll be times where you say, it just feels like nobody's buying this anymore, or nobody, or we're converting people less, or, whatever the situation is. And then when you pull up the stats, that just doesn't bear out. And there's just some, this is an arbitrary feeling that we're having in our head. And so I can't tell you, before I really learned this, how many times I would literally just say that at a whim of, I don't think this is working, and I don't know about this, and I don't feel like this is going. And then we pull up the stats and it's just absolutely not the case. And it was just something that I was feeling. And sometimes it's the exact opposite. And so it's very important as entrepreneurs to make decisions based on the data, make decisions based on outcomes instead of feelings. And when we're trying to prevent mistakes in the future, we want to always be reviewing our decisions, right? So maybe like weekly, we can sit down and look at our decisions over the week, look at everything that's been going on and say, was this the right decision? Are we going in the right direction? Have we fixed anything from last week that we were looking to fix? So that's going to help us solve problems in the future as well. And here's another one. Being a great entrepreneur is also not just about asking questions, like asking for feedback from your customers and asking for feedback from your team, but also letting other people ask you questions and to challenge your assumptions and your way of doing things. So if you're completely closed off to feedback or combative when people are trying to give you feedback, then that's not going to go well in the end. I think the best entrepreneurs take feedback from not only their customers, but also their staff members, their team, their business associates, their business partners, their vendors. I mean, anybody who's looking to improve all the time is going to always be looking for genuine feedback and really listening, taking it into account, and then acting upon it. I think some of the stuff that I'm guilty of in the past, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs are, is just being so dismissive over people's feedback or even people's complaints or people's ideas. Some people giving us great ideas, taking their time to have an idea for our business, and we're dismissive about it, and sometimes in a rude way. That is something that we want to strive to not do. We want to strive to use feedback as the great tool that it is, and appreciate anybody that happens to have an idea for us and lets us know. That's an amazing thing for somebody to do for us. So we want to make sure we actually listen to it and consider it. And maybe it's something we use, maybe it's something that we don't, but we want to be appreciative to the person for giving us that feedback or that idea, as opposed to being dismissive about it to their face. That's not how we want to be as a successful entrepreneur. All right. So let's go ahead and get into some questions here. So we do take questions. You can always ask us questions at Founding Without Funding or at Kyle Hiersche. You can send us DMs. We do this live, so you can ask questions live in the chat as well. Remember, the book is out at foundingwithoutfunding.com. So go to foundingwithoutfunding.com. You can read the book, you can take the course, and all that kind of good stuff. So foundingwithoutfunding.com, and you can also send us questions there as well. So let's go ahead and get into some questions that were sent in. Isla is asking, what's the hardest blind spot you had to admit to yourself as a founder? So the hardest blind spot I had to admit to myself as a founder, that's a great question. I think being maybe my ego. I think maybe my biggest blind spot as a founder, especially when I was younger, was my ego. And, not being as good of a boss as I should have been, not being as good of a leader as I should have been, not being as kind as I should have been. So, I'm humble enough now to admit that I definitely had a ego problem when I was younger. And this is maybe a byproduct of the fact that I've never had a job, never worked for anyone else. I always saw myself as the boss, as the, leader, and thinking that because I was successful early on and that I was already the boss, that I didn't need to learn a lot of these things, or that, I didn't kind of have to earn my way to being a good leader. And so I think one of the things that challenged me, and I think challenges a lot of entrepreneurs, is that there's a difference between being a boss and being a leader. And what we want to be is a good leader. And that's a lot more difficult than being a boss. So big difference there. And the more employees you have and the more experience you have, you start to really learn that there's a big difference between being a boss and a good leader. And as entrepreneurs, as founders of companies, as people who are running companies, we always want to be a good leader. All right, question from Carter. How do you know if you're making a mistake or just learning the hard way? So how do you know if you're making a mistake or just learning the hard way? Well, I think making a mistake is learning the hard way. And I think that's the best way to learn. It's the only way to really learn. Reading books, great, especially for business. Listening to podcasts, YouTube, videos, other experienced entrepreneurs, amazing. But that will never hold a candle to getting out there and doing something yourself and learning from it. It just won't. It doesn't matter how much you do. So we want to read books. We want to listen to motivational, podcasting and videos, and we want to do all that kind of stuff as well. But it's got to be in addition to actually getting out there and creating action and making things happen. And one of those things that you need to make happen is mistakes. That's one of the things that needs to happen, is for you to make mistakes to learn from. So, getting all this positivity, getting all this information, getting all this motivation, that's amazing. And we definitely want to do that. But the actual way that we learn is to be hands on and go out there and do things that we will learn that we could never read in a book or hear from someone else. Okay, question here from Rowan. I feel busy all the time. How do you tell if you're actually effective? So if you feel busy all the time and you're not sure if you're actually effective, I would dissect what you're doing. First off, write down what you do every day on a daily, on your daily basis, and then look at it and say, is this all actually as effective as possible? And do I need to be doing all this? Can AI do some of this? Can I buy a $20 piece of software, a $20 a month software subscription service that will do this part for me? Is there a virtual assistant I could hire for, $5 an hour that could make these calls for me or do this part for me? So I think the effectiveness of you as an entrepreneur in today's age starts with, what am I doing and what of that could be automated? Whether it's automated by using AI or by maybe using a service like Upwork, who, safely kind of joins together people with freelancers and oversees outsourcing. So look at what you're doing and figure out what of that you shouldn't be doing yourself. And then once you get those things off your plate, fill your plate up with more great things that you can do while those other things are being taken care of by artificial intelligence, or they're being taken care of by somebody that's being outsourced for very cheap, whatever the situation is. Okay, question here. Question here from Malik. How do you ask for honest feedback without getting generic answers? So to try to get better answers when you're asking for feedback, I would say just try to ask better questions, try to ask more specific questions. If you ask somebody for feedback on something, they're typically going to give you a one-word answer. You ask your friend, oh, how was that restaurant? Oh, it was great. It was good. It was great, right? So you have to probe a little bit deeper than that. And so, getting a 5-star review is great, but getting a 5-star review and some few sentences with it is a lot more amazing, of saying what they loved. Even if they said, yeah, this could have been a little bit better, but overall it was such a great experience. Now you got some really great feedback. These are things we're doing well. This is something we could improve on. So that's much better. So when you're probing feedback from people, of course, try to ask better questions. Try to ask more questions. Try to get more information from people. And of course, one of the best ways to do that is get on the phone with them. Then you can ask them all kinds of questions any which way, right? But when you're probing for feedback, or when you're inserting steps into your business to try to prompt people to give you feedback, and maybe you're even doing a prize if they fill out the survey or whatever it is, just making sure you're asking the right questions there is the most important part of getting the feedback that you really need to be constructive, and use it as constructive criticism and feedback. Okay, question here from Tess. What's one mistake founders don't realize they're making until years later? I think all of the mistakes we make as an entrepreneur, we realize years later were a mistake, or just, a while later. I think the larger mistakes we look back on a lot later. Like, for example, I just gave an example of one of my mistakes, I think, was my ego when I was younger. And so that's like the big glaring one that, 10 years, 20 years from then, now I look back and I say, oh, that was a big one. It took me years to realize that, right? It took me 10, 15 years to realize that was one of my biggest mistakes. So sometimes it does take a long time, especially with those big ones of, now that I'm older, now that I've had more staff members, now that I've been part of teams, now that I've built multiple companies, now that I sympathize and empathize with people more, I look back and say I should have been a better leader instead of being a more like ego-driven boss. And so I think those big glaring mistakes of, I just should have acted differently or approached things differently, those typically come years down the road after all that experience as an entrepreneur. Excuse me. Question here from Julian. How do you How do you stop defending your ideas long enough to actually improve them? How do you stop defending your ideas long enough to actually improve them? I wouldn't be defending your ideas, because defending your ideas, it sounds like you're in some kind of hostile environment. And I don't know if you're talking about defending your ideas from your friends and family, or defending your ideas from competitors, or whatever it is. Just work on what you're doing. You shouldn't have to defend anything that you're doing. Just do it, get it out there, get it to the market, let the market give you the feedback, let your customers give you the feedback, and learn from the mistakes along the way, tweak it, make it a little better, and put it out there again. All right, question here from Noel. Is it possible to self-correct without outside help, or do you always need perspective? Oh, it's absolutely possible to self-correct without help. Now, I think some of the help should be probably in forms of books and podcasts and videos of people who have done what you're trying to do, or successful people in general. They can help you via their books, their courses, or their videos or podcasts or whatever it is. And I'm not just talking about this one, I'm talking about all of them out there that are good and worth listening to and taking advice from. So, you should be getting help from those people, but you don't need any help from people around you to self-improve. You don't necessarily even need help from your business partners or your staff or team. At the end of the day, you have the power to look at feedback, look at things, look what's going on, and point out the problems, point out the things that you yourself see may be your weak points, and sit down and write down what you can do to improve them, and then execute that. It doesn't take help from anyone else. We can do that ourselves as entrepreneurs without any outside help. All right, question from Andre. How do you balance trusting your instincts with questioning your assumptions? So at the end of the day, as an entrepreneur, I think we should trust our instincts until the market tells us different. We should trust our instinct of what we want to do and how we want to go about doing it. And we should try that, keyword to try it, to do it. And then we should adjust from there. So always go with your gut feeling on what to do, but make sure that you're ready and open for feedback, and ready and open to change, and be flexible and pivot based on the feedback of the market and or your customers. Not move and change things just because you want to, and just trying different weird things. Use the feedback that the market is giving you. Are people purchasing it? Are they not purchasing it? Are they signing up for it? Are they not signing up for it? Are they converting at all? Are they not converting? The ones that converted, why did they? Get feedback from them. Did they have a good experience? Are they happy with the product or service? Ones that didn't buy it, why didn't they buy it? Do some probing into that, right? So we can all do that as entrepreneurs. So last question here from Theo. If someone wants to uncover one blind spot this week, what should they look at first? Yeah, so I think if you want to uncover a blind spot in your business right now, it's probably what you're spending your time on doing. So I would sit down today and say, list out, this is what I'm spending most of my days on. And then what of that can I assign to either AI or to some kind of software as a service that I could purchase, which most are very cheap, or something that I could outsource to somebody through Upwork or whatever outsourcing platform you may be using. So I would say that's the best thing you could do right now to make a big difference in what you're doing. All right, with that being said, we will go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode of the Founding with